There is no right way for us to breathe. Every single thought that you have has a correlated breath pattern.
But how do you facilitate that gear change?
If someone comes home from work, right, they're with family, and their mind is still operating at a 10 out of 10.
I certainly didn't want to offer an advanced holiday. I wanted something where people came in, moved, changed, and integration that had lasting impact. I've been through a curated experience of yours, and it is symphonic.
And most people running a retreat, which are really beautiful humans, tend to run a retreat with the assumption that rest is required. That now you might be thinking, well, what's wrong with that, right? And you then go lay by a pool for 5 days and do nothing. That's not going to achieve restoration.
Ultimately, it's still a decision between will I go on a holiday or will I go on a retreat?
So if you're looking to have your pina colada and going on a holiday, a traditional holiday, it's not for you. Yeah.
Gotcha.
What happens when the decompression starts to happen and we have that self starts to emerge? There's a reorganization that starts to occur within the entire system. It just hasn't had a chance to reorganize itself. People feeling like themselves again.
Essentially thinking we know and then walk out going, oh my God, what happened to me that day? Ultimately, they make more profit.
Yeah, another $100 million founder. There were really short exchanges in email with him, and he was quite resistant and apprehensive to begin with, and kind of said, what am I going to get out of this? And, I'm not willing to come to the whole thing. I'm willing to pay for half of it and just come to 4 days worth. And he's like, I don't want to stay on site. I want to stay on my own. Okay. And he attended the first day, and we had a breathwork session along with other pieces. And at the end of the first day, he said, I'm willing to...
Today I'm really excited about having a conversation with a dear brother of mine, Dan, about a topic that I'm particularly interested in. And it's a subject that you are well versed in, well qualified to be having the conversation, but it's around the idea and the concept of a retreat and what that actually means, and perhaps even a misunderstanding of what the intention of a retreat is, and we're going to talk about that today. But first of all, I want to introduce to you Dan Kurlapski. Welcome.
Thank you, mate. Thanks for having me.
Mate, I'm super excited about this conversation for a number of reasons. One, I think there's an opportunity to serve people that are interested in understanding what's going on for leaders, founders, people that are taking on an above average amount of mental cognitive load, and around the idea that heavy is the head that wears the crown. And so people that are taking a risk or building a business or employing a lot of people or taking on roles that require lots of responsibility. I speak for myself, I think there's this understanding that we're called for that, but there's also a responsibility and a pressure that comes from that. So I really want to talk about the concept of a retreat, the concept of what an alternate framing is for the retreat. But before we dive in that, I want to get to know you a little bit more in terms of you. Tell us a little bit about your experience with what it is that you do in a way that serves the people that you're called to serve in the modality that you do, which is FBR.
Yeah, so FBR is a part of what I do, which is facilitated breath repatterning, and it's an approach to breath work. And I remember when I had sort of encountered FBR as a technique, I wasn't necessarily out there looking for a technique that I could train up in and become a breathwork practitioner in. I was already a breathwork practitioner with the technique of rebirthing, yeah. And however, when I came across FBR, the philosophy and principles of FBR really resonated with my own life philosophy and how I approached this work already. And at the crux of that is for us as human beings to be expanding our capacity to be living life to the full spectrum of life and what life has to offer up. Yeah. So to receive all of life and be able to live life to the fullest of its spectrum in that sense. And that includes the activation piece, that includes the pressure that might arise in the roles that we take on in our lives in work, but also personally and carrying the family, and the pressure that can come with holding the family for both men and women, and the pressure that can come with holding an entire team, an entire company, holding ourselves and our own health amongst all of that. And all of that, there's a healthy level of pressure, there's a healthy level of doing, and there's a healthy level of activation. And I'm really not wanting to demonize any of that. And FBR as a technique doesn't demonize doing or being active. And I think in the space of the inner transformation work, often doing and being active gets demonized, like just rest, just relax, and that's it. And so what we're actually wanting is this beautiful dynamic balance between the activation, but also the relaxation, and also coming to a place where we don't have to wait to be done with the things that need to be done before we can relax, and that we can actually relax in the face of the doing and the activation piece, and we can be gently engaged in our relaxation piece as well, rather than being, just letting go and sort of not being engaged at all in life. Because I think that's a fear with a lot of the high-performing humans that I'd be working with, that if I was to relax, nothing's going to get done, and I won't be able to get back to the zone that I need to be in that's actually helped me build everything that I've built in my life and so on. So, FBR as a principle within the technique is that there is no right way for us to breathe. There is no, you might have heard, okay, we'll breathe down deeper into your belly and slow the breaths down. Well, that's not very useful if you're needing to move quickly. So a beautiful little inquiry is, what's the most appropriate, useful and healthy response given the stimulus that's in front of us? And if the stimulus in front of us is requiring a 10 out of 10 response, go for it. Meet it with a 10 out of 10 response. If the stimulus in front of us is requiring, it's maybe a 3 out of 10 response, but we're applying a 10 out of 10 response rather than a 3 out of 10, then we're overexerting ourselves, we're over-efforting, and that's where the depletion starts to happen, because we've gotten comfortable at operating just outside of what's a healthy activation. We do that again and again and again, day after day after day, year after year after year, and then we forget how to be able to genuinely relax and dip into relaxation without feeling like and having the perception that all of that's going to fall apart if we dip into relaxation.
In the work that you've done, can you give an example of when you see someone responding at a 10 out of 10 when it only requires a 3 out of 10? Can you sort of give some examples of when 10's appropriate and 3's appropriate?
Yeah, sure. So someone comes home from work, really simple, one that might seem too basic to be an example, but someone comes home from work, right? They're with family and their mind is still operating at a 10 out of 10. The challenge tends to be with switching off, because the drive that has supported this human to get to where they've gotten to with what they've built, they're unable to switch that off, and to genuinely relax. So now it's time, work's done, you're at home, and to be able to skillfully switch over into dropping into a 3 out of 10 level of activation and increase that toggle on the relaxation piece, but still remain gently activated, engaged in your conversation with your loved one, with your children, with whatever it might be. Even if you're on your own, being gently engaged with your own experience of the present moment here right now. So that's probably the most common example where 10 out of 10 approach is being applied to a situation that's actually requiring 3 out of 10 activation and asking for more relaxation in that moment.
So I can relate to that at times, having built a business and what it takes to operate and go home and switching gears. How is that? Because it sounds amazing, but how do you facilitate that gear change in those crucial moments when when you show up, when it matters most, when you need a 3? Given that the people that you work with a lot, the 10 out of 10 means that they are juggling stuff that, a lot of people don't need to juggle. And the fear that they have around adjustment, it's in the gap of the adjustment where there could be, a shadow lurking that something might happen. How do you help them transition that it's actually safe to fluctuate through those gears?
Yeah, well, you've hit the nail on the head there with that word safe. So why is the fear there? The fear is there because it doesn't feel safe for one reason or another. So what do we need to do to mediate that? We need to create the conditions for that human to feel safe enough for some part of that psyche of that human that doesn't feel safe enough to let go, for it to finally feel safe enough to let go into relaxation and come to a corrective experience of, oh, wow, like I can deeply and genuinely relax here, and then step back into activation with ease, and everything hasn't fallen apart. My whole world hasn't fallen apart. And so breath work, FBR breath work, specifically takes people on a bell curve journey. Yeah? And that bell curve journey holds two halves of, first half is activation. We're watching how is someone activating. Yeah, we like to say how you breathe is how you think. Yeah. So every single thought that you have has a correlated breath pattern. Yeah, really beautiful example of this. If you're walking down the street, someone comes out of nowhere, what's going to happen to your breath?
Yeah, it's going to start rising.
Yep. Yeah, it'll rise. You'll hold it.
Yep.
Right? So that there, the breath has responded to a perceived threat. Might be an actual threat, but it's responded to a perceived threat.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's done that, inherently wise, it's done that to prepare you, to activate you to either fight or to flee and run away. Yeah. So that's happening on a micro scale, on a day-to-day basis, and on a macro scale. Yeah. And so what we're looking for within the FBR breathwork journey is in this activation part, the first part of the bell curve where we're rising towards a peak and we're bringing more volume of the breath in, can the human remain relaxed whilst that's happening? Yeah. Now, first 5 minutes, if how you breathe is how you think, and how you think is how you behave and how you live, then how you breathe is how you live. Yeah. If we're seeing someone come in, out the gates, first 5 minutes, and we come in and we place intentionally, like an intentional touch or some body work that can help the person relax, and we see that they're not responding to that. So their malleability and responsiveness when there's an opportunity to relax is close to 0, maybe a 1 or 2 out of 10, and they continue to truck on. This is providing me with a lot of data about this human being and how they might be approaching life. Okay? We'll bring in a whole bunch of other facilitations to, calm that down just a little bit, but keep the activation going, but allow that layer of relaxation to be able to fully meet and be fully engaged with life and the breath with a layer of relaxation. So we're watching that. We're watching all the patterns, all the coping mechanisms, all the strategies in that first half of that bell curve. We get to a peak. And then the second half is relaxation and integration. But it's not the session's done and we've done most of the important session, which is the activation, because the doing is what has been celebrated and championed and sort of, in our society, the more you do, the better you are, and so on and so on. But we're now starting to prioritize relaxation and restoration more and include that in the picture. And so the second half of the journey, it actually takes up more of the entire journey than what the activation part does. 30 minutes of activation and then 30 to 40 minutes of relaxation integration. Now, we don't switch off. We don't stop the technique with the breathing technique, but we just start to soften it back. Soften it back, soften it back, soften it back, soften it back. Now, generally speaking, with the high performers or people that have been holding a lot and so on, they're seemingly great at the activation part. They can engage with it. They're kind of like a freight train, and there tends to be a fair bit of tension with it. So we're looking at encouraging the nervous system to continue with the activation, but let's just introduce 5% of ease. Yeah, just allow 5% of ease in whilst you're activating, and over the course of many, many years, what that means for that human's health in terms of how they start to engage with life can be the difference between disease, illness, and also adding more life to one's years, essentially, and the enjoyment that one can experience in life. Then, with the high performer, we come into the relaxation piece. The intention is to start to relax, and they just continue going. If they do allow relaxation, it lasts maybe 5 to 10 minutes, and there might be another 15, 20 minutes that you can be laying there doing nothing, completely letting go. And there's a there's an irritability that can come up in the system that we notice, a restlessness, that can come up. And it's like, cool, I'm kind of done. I'm ready to get up. I'm ready to get going and so on. Now, it's not to force anything on anyone, but it's simply to expand one's capacity for healthy activation and also healthy relaxation. If you expand one's capacity for both of those, you're expanding the colors you have available to you in living life and access to all the colors that life has available to you. Yeah. So that's the name of the game with FBR. And yeah.
I think it might be helpful to set some context here, right? So you and I, we live in Australia, but we met overseas in the US, in Austin, in Texas. And it's an interesting story because I remember we were both at a mastermind, and you and I engaged in a conversation. What do I do? I explain to you. And then I say, what do you do? And your answer was, it's actually just easier if I show you. And I said, what does that mean? You go, well, I could use a bunch of words, but until you've actually experienced it, it's very difficult for you to know what I do. And I'm like, okay, no problem. That was a 2 or 3 day event. And then throughout the course of that experience and that conversation, you said to me, hey, listen, would you like to experience it? And I'm like, yeah, sure, no problem. And you said, because I've gathered a few people from the event and we're going to get together. I've said, yep, I'm in. And I remember thinking at the time, I'm in an Uber. I'm about to drive from my hotel, and I'm turning up, and I'm thinking to myself, broad spectrum here, right? But I'm thinking, my intuition is not coming up with any red flags here, right? But I'm in an Uber, about to go to a house. I don't even know whose house it is. Meet a guy I've known for 48 hours. So this could go incredibly well or incredibly poorly. And the good news is that it went incredibly well. And what happened is we went into a house. There was 6 or 7 of us. There was you and a co-facilitator. And you took me on my first experience of a breathwork journey that transcended any understanding of what I thought breathwork was. Because up until that point, I'd have been exposed to Wim Hof and that movement. I'd also started reading, I think it's James Nestor's book called Breath. And I remember at the time thinking, I'm reading a book about breathing, which makes me go from unconscious breathing to conscious breathing. And I was feeling like I was holding my breath as I was reading the book. And so I knew from the research and the weight of the movement that breathing was a great unlock for health and your nervous system. But not until I experienced what I experienced with you did I understand. It felt to me, the only way I could explain the feeling was it felt like a plant medicine experience without any substance, all facilitated through the expert guidance of you and your team. And I wonder if there's an opportunity to really scale it back and explain, what did I experience that day? What I remember it being amazing. I remember the shadow and the afterglow. But even to this day, and as we've strengthened our relationship over the journey, I still find it very difficult to explain. And the idea that you said that, look, it's actually easier for me to show you than to explain to you. Like, I fully get that. Like, so what happened to me that day?
Yeah, beautiful. There's actually a word, whether it's in the plant medicine space or in the breathwork space, there's a word for there not being any words to describe the experience, and it's called it's ineffable. The experience was ineffable.
It was ineffable.
We simply don't.
It was ineffable.
Don't yet have the words to describe or explain some of those experiences. However, the base technique that we use, which many body-based breathwork approaches use, is called conscious connected breathwork. Yeah. And essentially it's a non-ordinary way of breathing, very simple, remove the pause at the top and the bottom. Yeah. And most breathwork approaches are doing this. And because it's a non-ordinary way of breathing, it's a part of the reason as to why you might enter a non-ordinary state of consciousness. Almost, for those that haven't experienced plant medicine, almost like a very lucid, dreamlike state. Yeah, you're inside of a dream, but still very present to it in that sense. And so in FBR, that's 20% of what we do. For a lot of breath work, that's all of what happens, and it's instructing that breath, and that's what's playing out and providing some basic support. With FBR, that's 20%. The other 80%, we're all body work trained. Yeah, so there's very intentional touch, and we work with touch, movement, and sound, because this helps us access the conditioning from the first 3 years of our life, where there was no language yet. For us as little babies and human beings, where we didn't have access to language and we couldn't interpret and create meaning about our lives and reality, all of our conditioning came from touch or lack of healthy touch, yeah, and movement and sounding, and then everything since then, yeah. And so, yeah, that non-ordinary state allows, and the healthy touch, movement and sound allows for the emergence of parts within our psyche that haven't felt safe enough to emerge and feel safe, and therefore allow the completion of a stress response that hasn't had the opportunity to be able to complete. And those incomplete stress responses, incomplete stress cycles are sitting in our low brain, the brainstem, the low brain, and they're influencing 90% of our decisions on a day basis. And they only complete and integrate once they are allowed to move through the fight, flight, freeze, and completion, contemplation, integration process and reflex there. So that's essentially what we're doing there. We use the breath technique as a way of allowing the entire system and the psyche to move into a non-ordinary state of consciousness, an altered state, dreamlike state. And then we work with touch, movement, and sound to allow the healthy processing of some of this stress, because the body is what actually reflects or expresses any stresses that we've experienced in our life. And when I say stresses, I'm talking about difficult conversation that you've had in the last 2 weeks, yeah, with your partner or professionally. And also maybe really incredibly challenging experiences in the first 8 years of your life as a child. And those are stress responses that remain incomplete in that low brainstem and are influencing our decisions on a day-to-day basis and capacity to be able to genuinely let go, relax, and so on. So a lot of those are beautiful drivers to what we've created in the world, and at the same time can be limiters to how we're experiencing and living our life. And so, yeah, it's really peeling away the layers of the onion. There's so much that can happen in one breath session. And we also love to work with people across a session arc where there's multiple sessions, which is why I create the container of what we could call a retreat or a chamber, where there's not only one session that you had experienced, but we do 5 consecutive sessions in a very well-held space that allows the continued processing of this for you to be able to walk out and apply it to your day-to-day life in a way where the change feels real and lasting. So
I really do want to get into the chamber with you shortly. I'm interested more in the touch, movement and sound component, right? Because I think anyone who is introduced to breath work can understand maybe what you talked about, the cycle, how you cut off the edges, and that makes sense. But it's the art of the touch, movement and the sound that is the creative expression that you and the talented crew who understand your modality do. But it was an unlock for me. And I think it leads into the conversation that we will have around retreats. But I think for me, there was a searching, and I feel like that the synchronicity of life brought you in at a moment that I think was perfect for me, because the overarching philosophy is I have spent a lot of my time helping people build a nest egg of wealth through property. So that's a big part of my backstory. But I really love talking with entrepreneurs who have taken on risk and all of the things that you spoke about before, and we'll dive into a bit deeper shortly. But the element of risk that these people take fascinates me, and I get engaged in lots of conversations. But I think the greatest unlock and where you can do the most high leverage work is in the space that you're describing, because if people have a better understanding of all of what holds us back, and you go as far upstream as you possibly can, downstream a whole world of beautiful things happens, because then entrepreneurs come into their business in a new state of being. Ultimately, they make more profit. If they're heart-centered people that are attracted to people like you and I as heart-centered people, then we can go and use that money to shine lights on lots of places around the world. But it was something that really I experienced. It moved me. I've introduced my wife into your world as a healing modality for nervous system. And I'm now on this journey to go, well, how do I bring people into this world, and then getting messy in my head around retreats, right? Because I think a retreat is something that you can easily, like I want to curate a group of people together and I want to take them on retreats. But if you're not careful on how you frame that up, until I engage in a conversation with you, a retreat to me is something that's a decision between going on a holiday or going on a holiday with a flavor of health, a flavor of let's do some stretching and some yoga, let's do some, eat some great food. But ultimately, it's still a decision between will I go on a holiday or will I go on a retreat? But you've framed it up for me in a way that I think it was super valuable to me, and I really want to share it today because, well, maybe it doesn't need any more backstory other than to throw it to you, but you frame up what a retreat actually is in a way that it really distances from the decision between a holiday. Can you tell us more?
Yeah, well, there were a few pieces that you touched on there. And if I just, before moving on with retreat, entrepreneurs, I love working with entrepreneurs because I think the entrepreneurial mind is brilliant. And if I can really support entrepreneurs to be able to allow that mind that is so open and is so capable of seeing opportunity and possibility in the world, those qualities are something that this world needs. And if they can do that from a healthy, thriving state and they are enjoying their life whilst they're doing so and able to do so over a longer extended period of time, that's only a good thing, as you mentioned, as a trickle-down effect for the rest of society. For them to be doing that from a healthier state of mind means healthier decisions that get made for broader society as well, and the businesses that then get created, if we see business as service to society, right? That's where a lot of my drive comes from. Now, the number one reason that there's the breath work, there's the unique approach to breath work where there's only 100 plus practitioners in this specific modality as to why someone would come to the retreat. There's the people that are holding the space and so on. These are all beautiful reasons as to why to come to the retreat. The number one reason is because I am hearing time and time again from people that they are wanting to be around like-minded humans. And like-minded humans, not only like-minded humans, because like-minded humans, what would qualify as that is, well, I'm in a room with a bunch of entrepreneurs. Well, they're like-minded humans. But I want to be around entrepreneurs that are going deep, that are diving deep, that are willing to look at some of the tougher parts, but also therefore the developing their own capacity to look at the tougher parts and therefore expanding their capacity to genuinely experience joy potentially again in life for the first time in a long time. Yeah. And so more and more are people wanting to come into connection with others that are on this similar journey. And that's one of the biggest value points in terms of people coming to the retreat. Now,
I agree, because I think you and I had that conversation earlier this morning when I call it the difference between community and crew. Whereas the community, I used to think I want to surround myself with the community, but when you actually dive into that at another layer, like community can be bonded by an activity. It could be the football club, it can be the golf club, it can be the mahjong club, right? But it's the activity that binds you. And if you take that activity away, sometimes the people that are within that community don't have any other bind versus your crew is the bond is the connection and the purpose and the heart. And I think I didn't understand the language until you helped articulate that, but I think that is true. When you are going through a transformational experience, you want to actually do that with other people who are wanting to lean in and be growth-minded versus fixed-minded. There's something about being around others that are vulnerable and wanting to lean into that growth and all that it comes with it is amazing. And I think you're right, being able to curate those people and give that access to that community. I think people are craving that.
Yeah. And in any human bond or connection, what's necessary for that bond and connection to occur and for it to be strong?
Well, a shared purpose, a vulnerability, a willingness to show up. Yeah, there's a few things come to mind. I'm sure you'll fill in the blanks.
Yeah, I think all of those fall underneath the umbrella of trust. There's got to be trust. Yeah, and the precursor to trust is vulnerability. And people that are leaning into seeing themselves and all parts of themselves, not just cherry picking, right? When you end up in a circle within 5 minutes with humans that are willing to go there and start to share from that place, you don't have to dive straight into it or whatever else. But when you see that people are sharing from that deeper place and that they themselves are opening up and being vulnerable, that immediately has this trust come online for you and the connection that starts to occur there very quickly at the retreats. So, yeah.
So, okay, let's get to the retreats. But before then, how did you, what was the life's sliding doors? What was the circumstances? What was the search that caused you to come to this work?
Yeah, it's a really good question. For me, this has been present in my life for a long time, but in different forms. And I think the biggest driver, I've always been fascinated in human behavior and by human behavior and psychology and so on. But also I've had this drive within me that's to simply see human beings fulfilling their potentials as human beings. Yeah, relationally with one another, but even in the outward expression of the internal freedom that they might experience. Yeah, a driver for a lot of this for me was, parents getting divorced and me finding my independence as a 16-year-old, outside of my parents and so on, and the driver to never work for anyone and stand on my own 2 feet and starting businesses that could be of beautiful service to society and so on and so on. But the fascination with human behavior and as a child always observing people around me and being brought up on Bruce Lee and relaxed intensity, which is exactly what I've just described FBR to be, finding the relaxation in the face of the intensities of life. I think all of this has weaved to me being here, and I've always loved bringing people together in a space, not to have fun, to allow for the joyfulness, the playfulness, but to also go deep. Yeah? And when I can combine those elements and bring people together and take a step back and watch that unfold and people connecting with one another and having the most incredible of times whilst going deep at the same time, there's nothing that brings me more joy. And it's just been a natural sort of emergence for me as work coming, from being a physiotherapist, running businesses from when I was 23, working in elite sports, Sydney Swans, Sydney FC, masters of physiotherapy, exercise sports science, the whole science world, the whole business world, but then going, hey, I can go deeper, I can go beyond the body, and going into mindset, then going into psychology, and then going into spirituality, which for me simply means knowing thyself, just understanding you and all parts of you and what you are ultimately versus what you've taken yourself to be, and then bringing those two worlds together, meditation, breath work, plant medicine, spirituality, all of that together with the Western business, entrepreneurialism, and creating a bridge between the two because they're not two separate things. Yeah, so that's what's brought me to this, and it'll forever be my work and continue to evolve in its form.
Well, as a product of the product, I wish that I could use words to describe what that experience is, but if we revert back to Austin, Texas, and you go, it's better to show you than to tell you, I think people need to experience it to understand. But as we pivot towards the conversation, you don't call them retreats. Well, you do, but you frame it up differently. I think to build some context, I said to you, I really see a future where the entrepreneurs that I gather in my world, I really want to bring them together for a transformation experience. And so we're having that later this year, and I'm really excited about that. But I certainly didn't want to offer an advanced holiday. I wanted something where people came in moved, changed and integration that had lasting impact. So I wonder if you could give us the frame that the lens through which you see these experiences, and then we can maybe talk about the curation of what the experience looks like.
Yeah, okay. So maybe let's start with talking about what the general definition of a retreat is, or when people think of a retreat, and most people running a retreat, which are really beautiful humans, that run retreats with beautiful intentions, tend to run a retreat with the assumption that rest is required, that they're running it for people that are tired and require rest. Yeah. Now you might be thinking, well, what's wrong with that, right? That's needed and that's necessary, but it's very limited because that's only the starting point. Yeah. What I mean by that is you can go lay poolside for 5 days. Yeah. And if you're a person that's been holding a fair bit of pressure over the years, maybe even just throughout the year, but over the years, family, as we've mentioned, company, business, and so on, and you then go lay by a pool for 5 days and do nothing, that's not going to achieve restoration. Yeah. So removing the stimulus is one thing, but then being in an environment, being in what we're calling, it's the best word that I've come up with, being in a chamber, where you step in. Imagine if you've got a pressure chamber, right, a pressure cooker, right? The opposite is true as well, where you come into a decompression chamber. Yeah, you step in, and merely by stepping in, because of who it is being held by and how those people are holding themselves and the facilitator's capacity to be able to hold themselves, your system, your psyche at an unconscious level kind of says, right, cool, I trust you, you've got this, so I'm going to give myself permission to relax here. So before lifting a finger and doing anything, because of the way that the chamber is being held from beginning to end, the restoration is already starting. Yeah?
And I think what's not often said is for someone who's a high achiever, high performer, high responsibility, the postcard sitting by the pool for 5 days is a very difficult reality, because after the first day you get fidgety. And my wife found out very quickly that when we go on holidays, I love momentum, and sitting by a pool doesn't really give me the momentum hit that I like, right? So she couldn't understand at first where I would go and I would actually watch something that I learn, but I'm by the pool. Or I would read something that I can engage my mind, that I can use later. And what I think about what you just described is, for someone who is used to momentum, let's call it momentum, by coming into your world and identifying that, okay, here's a space, you've got this, and the sense that you've got the momentum covered means that surrender is something that they can do, because the surrender into nothingness is something that they, at the very least, don't have any experience with because of the way that they work day to day. But secondly, the buy-in for the transformation that's about to come is going, okay, all right, well, I can actually comfortably surrender here because I know something's about to happen. I just don't have to drive it.
Well, it being held in that way is what allows for that first step of decompression to occur. And when that decompression can occur, which means, a version of ourselves that's been held down underneath the pressure that's been on top for years and years and years, then starts to have an opportunity to be able to emerge. Yeah, and when that starts to have an opportunity to be able to emerge, it's not as though we arrive here and at the 5-6 day retreat and do nothing, and that we're just sitting there and we're holding the whole thing. Where it's intentionally designed, moment to moment, piece by piece, in terms of activity we might be doing or not doing, where there might be a cerebral workshop, but then we balance that out with something that's body-based here. We might start the day with an activity that allows us to relax without us going into it thinking we need to relax to do this activity, which tends to be the issue that people have and challenge with something like meditation. So we've got all these activities that allow people to drop into a meditative state without the purpose being to relax, and we thread the entire retreat and intentionally designed the entire retreat from beginning to end, from day 1 to day 6, with these activities. The core of it is the breath work. Yeah. Now, a beautiful piece to shine a light on is what happens when the decompression starts to happen and we have that self start to emerge. There's a reorganization that starts to occur within the entire system that just hasn't had a chance to reorganize itself. And what I mean by that, it's kind of no more pressure, decompression occurs, opening up, the psyche, the system, the nervous system can to start to reorganize. There's a bit more space for parts to come through. And then things that you've been working on have an opportunity to settle, the pieces land. And then you start looking forward at what might be next for you in your life, on your path, professionally and personally. Yeah? What's the next chapter hold? What does the next season hold? For my family, where do we want to live? What's the next iteration of this business, or what's the next business actually that feels most true for me that's coming through? And all of that then feeds into a clarity that starts to crystallize. And we run the retreat chamber in sections that facilitate each of those processes, from decompression, reorganization and clarity, and then integration, so that you're not going off, heading to the airport, and then all of those patterns that you came into the chamber with just start coming through when you don't have any skills to be able to navigate those. We have a call that happens a month after the chamber to help with the integration process and make these changes real and long-lasting and lifelong changes, actually.
Yeah, I think that's an important piece, the final integration, because I've been in enough processes with practitioners, including you, that it's the state afterwards that when you go straight into kids or straight into some urgency or routine, that there's a discombobulation that happens with that. So I like that you've intentionally created the space for the room for that peak to actually integrate without sort of going back into a world ill-equipped and sort of jolted by external stuff. But you might have a comment on that, but what are some of the major immediate benefits that you've seen from this through? Because I've got to say that I've been through a curated experience of yours, and it is symphonic. And the detail that you've gone to facilitate that whole journey of transformation is just elite. But what is some of the immediate aftermath benefits that you find attendees experience post the chamber?
Yeah, a level of clarity that has the capacity and potential to change one's life in a way where you just don't look back. And that's very common, very frequent. I can't tell you what the clarity is going to be on, but that is the most common theme leaving there. There's a sense of lightness and a sense of people feeling like themselves again. People feeling like they're a human, that they're okay with others being around. Yeah, a better human to be around. We have people come there because they need a bit of a break from work, and they also came there feeling, as bad as it might sound, feeling like they needed a break from family, right? They come there, and halfway through, they can't wait to get back. They cannot wait to get back. Family visiting them during the breath sessions and so on and so on. So, yeah, there's a real expansion of one's capacity and a new baseline within the nervous system that gets established. And then it's about taking that out into the world and allowing our day-to-day life to test that in a way so that it can really stabilize. So that new baseline can stabilize, and we continue on in life stepping forward with this new baseline. So we come in with a particular baseline that might be hyper heightened, and leave with one that's more balanced and relaxed, but with a capacity to be able to engage in life and not be thrown too far off center and out of balance. Now, it shows us the work to be done. A lot of the work gets done, and then the support is there to continue on. It's not a check in, check out. The care and support that's offered up is well beyond the retreat as well.
So without sharing names, give us a couple of stories of some people that have had that transformation and what that transformation has actually landed for them. I know you sort of talk generally about some of the things, but can you think of a couple of client experiences post these chambers that's had an immediate impact and a big difference when they come home? Because at the end of the day, that's probably where the meaningful impact happens, right? Because as amazing as the 6 days is, it's ultimately people, to separate it from a holiday to a transformation experience, you want to be able to utilize it in the everyday. So can you think of a couple of examples, one or two examples of clients, some of their real world experiences?
Yeah, absolutely. And some of the examples I've spoken to were touching on those real life humans. They were coming to mind there. So, a high level TV exec that's come in super high octane workplace, operating at this high level, comes in thinking there's no way I'm just going to come in, do a few breath work exercises or whatever else. I'll learn about the science of breath work, and then hopefully I'll be able to apply those to my life. And within a day and a half, this human is connecting with a part of themselves that they haven't connected with. And there's pieces coming up for them from when they were 5 years old that for the first time ever, they feel like they've brought that experience to a completion and realized how that was influencing and impacting their capacity to connect with their nearest and dearest, their family members, their partner, their children. And so stepping out of the retreat, connecting with their family, they're all the same humans, but connecting at a much deeper level, even though the love was always there, right? But there was now an openness and an increased capacity for that love and a presence, actually, rather than coming from a place of pressure. They were coming from a place of presence with their family members. The way that they described it was they were now felt free as a bird. They felt light with an expanded capacity. And that's how they were meeting, their family and their work, moving from there. Another $100 million founder with his partner. He was referred to me by another client of mine and to this retreat. And there were really short exchanges in email with him, and he was quite resistant and apprehensive to begin with, and kind of said, what am I going to get out of this? And I'm not willing to come to the whole thing. I'm willing to pay for half of it and just come to 4 days worth. And so, I kind of said, it's not something we normally do, but if you're going to come for a part of it, I'll let you have your own experience and you make your own decision at that point. And so I said, okay, if you're going to come to half, come to the first 4 days. Yeah. And he's like, I don't want to stay on site. I want to stay in my own place. Right. I was like, okay, well, you can choose to do that too. And he attended the first day, and we had a breathwork session along with other pieces there. And at the end of the first day, he said, listen, I'm willing to pay for the whole retreat, and I'd love to stay on site, right? And so he now has become a dear friend and, attended other retreats, continued to come and engage in the work, and he's looking to spread this work with others. And for him to be able to, really meet himself in a way that he didn't feel he was able to because of how much he was looking after everything else and how much he was driven in the world of business to create what he was creating and what he had on his plate. He just didn't have the space and time, and it almost felt selfish to do things that brought him joy. Really simple, right? And it's not to do that and then step away from the world of business at all, but actually have it amplify and positively influence what you're doing in the world of business. And really, really beautiful story there.
I like that.
Tempted to mention his name, but I'm not going to.
No, I'm sure he wouldn't be happy with that if he wanted to stay off-site for the first day. So, and I think from the journey of having the conversation with you, I think there's been many occasions where you've told me stories where someone's been, is there an escape route here but by day 2 they're like, well,
the nature of this work, it's really difficult to explain or describe.
Got to show you.
You've got to experience it. So, yeah.
Gotcha. I think, would it be too simplistic to say that a lot of people arrive into the chamber driven by their head or their ego and leave driven by their heart's agenda? Is that too simplistic? Is that a good way of looking at it? Is that, we walk in essentially thinking we know and then walk out going, oh my gosh, I should have been listening to that a long time ago.
So essentially, absolutely, yes. And one thing that I want to be mindful of is that I think in the world of inner transformation, inner work, whatever you want to call it, the mind can also be demonized a little bit, yeah, or the baby thrown out with the bathwater. And so that many people will come in kind of, driven from that place, but something deep down inside of them already knows that they need to offer themselves up a reprieve. And it's not that they need fixing. That's a really important piece. No one that attends the retreat needs any fixing whatsoever. It's not why you're coming to this thing. Everyone is already whole prior to lifting any finger. Yeah, even prior to lifting any finger and creating anything in the world, already fully whole. However, you come there and simply by being inside of that chamber, allowing the transformational process to take place and for the work to be done on you, you come out integrating mind and body and heart, and feeling like you're more in your body, embodying this body, and still holding a healthier version and thought pattern of mind and thought structures of mind with that, because we need the mind, yeah. However, we want to be able to use it as a tool rather than being used by it.
And the mind is the vehicle of trying to trick you that you are broken. So that's the bit that you go through these experiences and remind yourself that there's a higher creativity, there's a drive that if you listen to it has the best intention. You realise your heart doesn't do deals, and if you don't serve the needs of your mind or your ego, but to your point, don't demonise it, but to overcome the biggest, I think, human condition that we think we're broken and we need to be fixed. I think, you've articulated that really well. I guess for me, there's an element of I want to collaborate with you. I want to bring people that are special to me and mean a lot to me along for these experiences. So the part of the motivation today was to lean in and have a conversation with you about a topic that I'm really passionate about, but rewind the tape where you say, well, I can't actually tell you what it is. You've got to experience it. And so you can imagine what I'm like trying to even get to that. But tell me who a retreat in a chamber environment, tell me who it's for, but also tell me who it's not for.
Yeah. So if you're looking to have your pina colada by the poolside and going on a holiday, and a traditional holiday, it's not for you. Yeah, and that's okay. It's completely fine. You can have an amazing time taking on a holiday like that. Now, an experience is offered up, in this chamber, but it doesn't stop at the experience. Yeah, it's to receive the insight of the experience and to integrate the insight of the experience in a way that goes beyond words and so on. So, if you're someone that's been feeling like, cool, I'm holding a lot. Yeah, I'm just feeling like I'm holding a lot. You might not be in burnout per se, but you're holding a lot, and checking in with yourself just this one time in the year, maybe twice, but once people come, maybe every year, to recalibrate. Yeah, not because you need fixing, but to allow a little bit of that depressurization to occur, to reorganize a little bit, and have a deep and profound platform to be able to move forward from. Now, a lot of people that are post-exit or in transition, having just sold or in transition between, senior levels of leadership or in transition between companies and businesses and so on, tend to find both the chamber, the retreats, and the integration work that gets done really, really useful in terms of arriving at a level of clarity as to, okay, what are the next steps coming from here, and can I recalibrate the system so that I've got a really strong platform to move from in my personal and professional life.
Yeah, it's interesting too when people get to that, some of your clients are high-level executives that look after large teams. You've got, post-exit people. And so it's interesting that probably a lot of those people start off thinking that that's what they want, but then they arrive and then find themselves asking more questions, right? So, but I guess if anyone has been listening and any of this resonates, there's There's actually no sales funnel.
Mm.
It's really, if there's something that, the conversation we've just had sparks that wants you to know more, the idea is to just really act on the urge to find out more.
Mm.
Because it's a curated experience for people that are, to your point, not wanting pina coladas, they want transformation. But there's also questions that people will have. So, I asked you if you were okay to have this conversation with me, because we have these conversations anyway, you and I, so recording them so that I can share this conversation with others. But if someone does feel something from what we've just experienced, what do you suggest is the next step?
Yeah, I mean, there'll be a link to the site, just simply for information, so that if it's still speaking to you after you've read through a few pieces there and you've got questions, there's an opportunity to jump on a call with me, and that call is simply so that I can have a conversation and get a feel for whether it's the right time for you right now. And if not, I'd love to point you in the right direction, because it might not be the right time right now, and that's completely fine as well. And if it is the right time, I think that's what makes these 5 or 6 days quite special, that everyone that's there has fully chosen to be there, and it's the right time for them. So my email, dan@yes-and.com.au. It's as simple as that. You can reach out, ask for more information, and we can jump on a 15-minute call as well, just so that I can ask you some questions and see where you're at with all of this, and what's driving you to potentially come and delve into these 5 or 6 days, and we take it from there.
To say I'm excited about what the experience looks like would be an understatement. I'm looking forward to it, and I'd certainly encourage anyone who's not looking for some holiday experience, they're looking for a full transformation to be a part of it, mate. So tell me, mate, how important is location and where you hold a chamber to the experience of the transformation?
Yeah, so environment for the nervous system is super important. Yeah. First and foremost, as much as we can be in nature, then there's this direct resonance between all the cells in our system here that are nature in and of themselves, and with nature itself, one and the same, right? And I'm actually really, really excited by the space, the environment, the venue that we're going to be holding these 6 days for the November retreat at. It's all heavily focused on sustainability. It is an incredibly high luxury venue that is focused on sustainability, on the edge of a cliff, Nusa Penida, Bali, private beach, intentionally designed bamboo shala that mimics nature in and of itself, in the shapes and the way that it's been created and designed by this beautiful architect. And from a tea house that's on the edge of that cliff, that will be engaging in pretty deep tea ceremonies with a tea ceremonialist, and movement sessions, and daily traditional yoga, not simply yoga as an exercise, but traditional yoga, all supporting the daily deep breathwork journey that's happening across the 6 days. There'll be 5 journeys, and we bring that all to a culmination with a traditional ancient Mexican sweat lodge, a temazcal, which is a sweat lodge, which is a 2-hour ceremony in and of itself that brings it all to a head. And it's a final clearing process, physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And we lay down the framework and a pathway. We go through a process where there's a pathway that gets laid down, and you create that pathway and get guided through creating that pathway for a vision moving forward for yourself in the world of business and personally in your life as well.
Mate, it sounds like it's a cocktail of all of the senses that you'll experience, and the venue will give a link to the venue around this video, but to say it's incredible would be an understatement. But mate, I'm really excited. I'm really looking forward to being a part of the experience, and certainly encourage other souls that are on the journey to come and join us. So as always, mate, I love these conversations with you, and it's been a real joy and a pleasure today.
Yeah, thank you, mate. It's been Awesome. Been great.